Discover the incredible blind date surprise, a paralyzed CEO's hidden chance to smile again. Jack Turner, once the proud CEO at the helm of a booming enterprise, now found himself staring into a fragmented mirror reflecting a life derailed. The bustling energy of Chicago, a city he once dominated, felt suffocating from his wheelchair. He pushed forward, projecting an air of composure, yet every roll through the skyscraper-lined streets cloaked him in a heavier shroud of despair. The laughter of his children echoed within him, a haunting reminder of what he reverently held dear before the accident: his ambition, his authority, his freedom. Now tangled within a web of insecurities, he battled a relentless wave of anxiety that pooled in the pit of his stomach. Mary, his younger sister, watched the flicker of hope in his eyes fade. Determined to spark even a flicker of the joy he once radiated, she concocted a plan that would push Jack beyond his self-imposed limits, arranging a blind date. "You need to give this a chance," she'd insisted, her voice laced with firm affection. The mere thought unsettled him. How could he dip his toes back into the turbulent waters of dating when his own reflection seemed alien? What qualities did he still possess worth sharing with another person? The day of the date arrived, and Jack hesitated, wrestling with the choice that could either lift him up or deepen his sorrow. As he wheeled himself through the cafe's door, the surreal atmosphere overwhelmed him, the aroma of coffee beans mingling with artistic chatter, as laughter buzzed through the air. Opposite him sat Lisa, an art teacher whose vibrant spirit brimmed with energy. Here he was, paralyzed and encased in fear, while she matched his unease with her own daunting stories of self-doubt. As they exchanged words, the connection sparked, yet Jack's tumultuous thoughts niggled at the edges of every encounter. He searched for pity in her laughter but found none, only warmth. Yet, for each smile she bestowed upon him, an equal rush of self-loathing clouded his heart. Buried deep beneath material success lay a talent for painting he had suppressed. How could he show her this side of him when he felt he had succumbed to the shadow of a person he once was? Before they could ignite a deeper intimacy, an awkward moment erupted, his fears manifesting as thoughts raced through his mind. Was she simply feeling sorry for him? Jack recoiled, the walls he'd built cratered his trust as he withdrew behind an insurmountable fear of rejection. Luckily, amidst their awkward silence, a thought intruded, fragmenting his spiraling thoughts. If he let go of the fear, could he rediscover that flicker of who he was? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The growing tension swirled with an almost suffocating pressure as his mind crackled with defiance. In that pivotal moment, Jack contemplated confessing his real struggles, not just the accident that altered his life, but the creative part of him indoctrinated by loss. As their eyes locked, an undeniable spark shimmered, yet like all good things, it hung precariously. Just as consciousness of his hidden talent stirred within, the shrill of his phone cut through the moment, an old colleague's name flashing across the screen. The past came knocking with precipitating echoes, rekindling old battles that could doom an already fragile step toward hope. Jack looked at Lisa, questioning if he could push past the shadows that threatened to consume him once again. Would he dare to let himself be vulnerable, or would he allow old wounds to crush the budding connection? The tension held him captive, the night far from over. The ringing phone shattered the moment like glass, sharp and jarring. Jack's heart raced as he glanced at the screen, his colleague Steven's name igniting a flood of memories. Once, he would have answered immediately, eager to engage in business banter or strategize over a new project. But now, the call symbolized everything he had left behind, a reminder of the urgency and the ambitions he had once held dear. Lisa, sensing the shift in his focus, offered a gentle smile, her eyes reflecting understanding, and invitation to reconnect. Yet the tight knot of anxiety in Jack's stomach tightened further. "It's someone from my past," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. The urge to answer fought against his desire to remain grounded in this fragile but promising connection. You can always call them back, she encouraged, her tone unwavering. There was kindness in her expression that eased some of Jack's internal chaos. It would take courage to momentarily prioritize this date over the expectations of old colleagues and the weight of unfinished business. It felt monumental, a decision not just about a phone call but a testament to his willingness to reclaim his life. Against his instincts, Jack hit the decline button, watching as the name vanished from the screen. What should have sparked a sense of relief instead brought a chilling realization. Choosing vulnerability meant acknowledging the gap between who he had been and who he was learning to become. With a determined breath, he allowed himself to refocus on Lisa, who patiently awaited his return. "You know, I used to paint," he confessed, feeling the warmth of the cafe envelop him, balancing on the fine line of uncertainty. The word surprised even him, hovering in the air with the potential to redefine the evening. The buried passion surged forward, eager yet fearful of exposure. Would Lisa still find him appealing, or would this revelation expose the raw core of his insecurities? Really? Her eyes sparkled with intrigue, and for a moment, Jack felt buoyed by her genuine interest. "What do you paint?" As he hesitated, his thoughts flipped through a flicker of color, light, and form's bold strokes that once felt like extensions of his soul but had since dimmed under the weight of reality. "Abstracts mostly. But it's just a hobby now." The fluidity of his words felt like an anchor in an ocean of uncertainty. He had dared to share a piece of himself. "Art is more than a hobby," Lisa countered, leaning forward. "It's a way of communicating when words fail. Have you thought about picking it up again?" The question hung heavily in the air, laden with implications Jack hadn't fully considered. He had buried that part of himself, locked it in a box marked past, convinced that embracing creativity was a luxury he could no longer afford. But as Lisa's enthusiasm filled the space between them, he felt a stirring reminder that perhaps rediscovery was not only possible but necessary. "Maybe I could," he replied, noting the shifting feelings within him. A blend of excitement and fear ignited an ember of hope rooted in the warmth of their exchange. Could this encounter be a catalyst for his resurgence? Each word from Lisa chipped away at the defenses he deconstructed, revealing a budding desire to embrace life's possibilities, even from the confines of his situation. Then, the clamor of the cafe faded into the background, and Jack envisioned himself in his old studio, a palette of colors beckoning him, brushes poised for expression. The spark within had grown hotter. If he was to reclaim some semblance of purpose, if he were to let someone in, he needed to ignite this overdue journey back to art, to himself. As their conversation deepened, Jack began to navigate through layers of vulnerability. He wanted to challenge himself, not just in this date but also in rewriting the narrative of his life. How could he grasp that opportunity without succumbing to the fear of failure lurking just beneath the surface? The clock ticked on, but with every minute, a new determination took root amidst the uncertainty. The connection with Lisa demanded honesty and self-discovery, coaxing him further away from the shadows where he had long hidden. When the moment came for the evening to wind down, Jack felt a mixture of apprehension and exhilaration. He had glimpsed the potential for a new chapter to unfold, one marked by creativity instead of regret and caution. Standing at the edge of this realization, he questioned what lay ahead. Would he seize the moment to intertwine his past with a new future? With that thought weighing heavily on his conscience, a new buzz came from his phone, a text from Stephen. Was this the reality he had been dragging behind him finally catching up? Jack felt the skirmish within him intensify as he read the words displayed on the screen. What would he choose next? Would he sink back into his old life, or take the step forward he had just begun to envision? The vibrations of his phone electrified the moment, breaking Jack's reverie. Glancing at the screen, the text from Stephen looked deceptively innocuous but held a looming threat, a reminder of how swiftly life could shift on him. He considered ignoring it, letting the connection with Lisa continue to deepen, to flourish, but the familiar pull of unresolved business urged him to engage. "Is everything okay?" Lisa asked, her brow furrowed in mild concern. Jack hesitated, torn between the allure of the present and the shackles of his past. "It's just work stuff," he replied, trying to sound nonchalant, though the tension in his voice betrayed him. "I'll deal with it later." As Lisa nodded, he couldn't ignore the nagging question, why did he care so much about Stephen's message? The energy that coursed through him from their conversation felt transformative, yet lingered beneath it was the specter of failure looming over his past decisions, echoing like haunting whispers. Unable to resist, Jack opened the message. Hey, Jack. Just checking in. We miss your ideas at the strategy session. Let's catch up soon. Simple words, yet they clamored for his attention, as if they possessed the power to pull him back into the orbit of a life he thought he had escaped. Sorry about that, he mumbled, trying to mask his turmoil. He was more acutely aware of shifting dynamics between him and Lisa. It's my old team. Just reaching out like always. I get it, she replied. But don't feel obligated to respond if you're not ready. Sometimes, it's best to take a step back. The wisdom in her voice struck a chord, and Jack found himself resonating with her words. Yet as the image of color-splattered canvases flooded his mind again, it dawned on him how instrumental this moment with Lisa could be. She represented the potential for a future that he had almost abandoned. Can I be honest with you? The words slipped out, surprising even him. Of course, Lisa encouraged, leaning in slightly, her appreciation shone in the warmth of her expression. You make me remember parts of myself that I thought I had lost forever. I hadn't considered painting on that level in years. Life got in the way, but being here, talking to you, it's different. Her smile widened, providing an invitation for Jack to delve deeper into those emotions floating precariously at the edges of his consciousness. There was power in that recognition, the acknowledgement that he could reclaim his passion. I feel it too, she admitted softly. We hold so much back, thinking we have to conform to what others expect. But rediscovering what makes you, you, is crucial, isn't it? Jack nodded, grappling with the force of revelation coursing through him. Lisa was right, he had been trying to live up to an outdated version of himself, tethered to expectations that had once seemed necessary but now felt stifling. The more I think about it, the more I realize that I want to paint again, he confessed, exhilaration rising within him like a tide. Not just as a hobby but as something I need to do. Then let's make a plan for it, Lisa suggested, her eyes shimmering with enthusiasm. What if you set aside time each week to rediscover your creativity? No pressure, just pure expression. The thought alone sent a thrill through him. Art had always been a language he felt fluent in, a realm where he could express vulnerability and complexity without judgment. Could this commitment rekindle not just his passion but also his sense of self? Thank you, he said, words filled with intensity and gratitude. I can't remember the last time I felt this alive about something. The cafe around them faded into the background as that realization settled in, a flicker igniting a flame. In this moment, Jack felt a promise building between them, not just a connection but an agreement to both navigate this journey of rediscovery together. But as the clock edged closer to closing time, the balance of his dual life bore down heavily in his mind. How would he incorporate this newfound ambition and dedication into his existing responsibilities? The clatter of the cafe tumult and the certainty of his obligations began to blur his clarity. Just as he contemplated this overwhelming path ahead, Jack's phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Stephen. The urge to let it go was powerful, but a strange curiosity about the conversation paired with the nagging weight of his unresolved past drove his fingers to answer. He inhaled deeply, trying to summon the courage he had just been nurturing. Maybe this conversation will show me if I can really juggle both these worlds, he thought, answering the call, his heart racing with both trepidation and anticipation. Just as the call connected, Jack's entire body grounded itself, bracing for the clash of his old life and this vibrant new possibility hanging in the air. Would he seize the chance to confront his past or let it slip back into the shadows? The voice on the other end spoke, but Jack could barely hear over his own thoughts swirling, creating a perfect storm of challenge and uncertainty. How could he navigate this duality, striking a balance between everything he once was and everything he aspired to become? A voice echoed in his mind, prompting him to question everything. Was he truly ready for the confrontation to come? As the connection snapped to life, Jack's heart raced. The familiar voice on the other end cut through the static of his uncertainty, each word dropping into his consciousness with an unsettling weight. "Hey, Jack. I'm glad you picked up. I really wanted to talk about the upcoming initiatives we're planning." Stephen's tone was casual, but the underlying expectation was palpable. Jack's mind swirled. Could he keep this conversation anchored to business without letting it tug him back into the vortex of his past? He fought to maintain a composed facade, pushing aside the distractions of his earlier conversation with Lisa. They had crafted a shared vision, one where his creativity could breathe and expand. But here, on the phone, his old life beckoned with the promise of stability and familiarity. As Stephen rambled on about strategy and market trends, Jack squirmed in his seat, each point dredging up misgivings he thought he had buried. How do I tell him I'm not in this place anymore? He wondered. The walls of expectation loomed high on all sides, casting a long shadow over his aspirations. "Jack. You there?" Stephen's voice broke through his thoughts, demanding his attention. "Yeah, I'm here," Jack replied, forcing himself to focus. "Sorry, just got distracted for a moment." "What were you saying?" They resumed their conversation, but the words bounced off him, becoming part of a droning hum. Jack was no longer just listening, he was analyzing, critiquing his responses to the barrage of demands from his old life. The constraints with which he had once been comfortable now felt suffocating. How had he allowed himself to be drawn back into this cycle? He had promised himself there would be no return, no complacency. "Let us brainstorm some new ideas together," suggested Stephen, oblivious to Jack's internal dialogue. "We rely on your expertise, it's crucial for the team's direction." This dependence stung like salt in a wound. Jack's passion was not just an asset, it was his identity. The image of him painting again, each brushstroke laden with purpose, danced at the edges of his thoughts. How could he reconcile this yet untamed yearning with the demands of the corporate world? He began to formulate a response, a careful balancing act between professional obligation and personal desire. "We can set up a session next week," Jack said, testing the waters. "But I'll need some flexibility in scheduling. I'm also committing to some personal projects." The decision pulsated in the air as he articulated his refusal to be at Stephen's beck and call. "Personal projects?" Stephen echoed, surprise lacing his voice. "What do you mean?" Jack hesitated. Would he reveal the truth about the significance of his reconnection with art or keep it shrouded in ambiguity? Just exploring some creative avenues, he settled on, unsure of how much to share. If there was vulnerability to be expressed, it would have to be done carefully, strategically. "All right, I get it. But remember, we could really use you on board. Your input is invaluable, and it's good for the team's morale," Stephen replied, frustration wavering in his tone. The words hung heavy, they echoed the expectations of his past, a reminder of how crucial he had been and perhaps still was to their collective identity. He could feel the weight of those expectations pressing down as he wrestled with what it meant for his future. "Don't worry, I'll contribute," Jack offered. "But let us ensure I can give my best. I can't afford to be half committed to either side of my life." The silence stretched, and he sensed Stephen's hesitation. Perhaps this was a moment of vulnerability, a window into something greater. But it was fleeting, evaporating with Stephen's next words, grounding Jack back in the stubborn reality of business. "All right, we'll figure it out. Let us set a time, and we'll move forward then," Stephen concluded, a note of resignation sinking into his tone. Jack hung up feeling a cocktail of relief and dread. He had taken the first step towards asserting his boundaries, yet the fear echoed long after the call ended. How long? Could he maintain this precarious balance? The vibrant picture of painting glimmered in his mind's eye, yet he was faced with a stark reality. Could he truly walk two paths simultaneously, or was the call to his corporate past too overwhelming to resist? As he sat in the fading light of the cafe, questions clung to him like shadows. What if this was a wrong turn back to the life he had been so eager to leave? Jack felt the tension knotting in his stomach. He stared out at the bustling street, his thoughts swirling. Would he have the courage to let his passion lead him, or would he remain stuck, tethered to expectations that no longer served him? The space between his dreams and reality felt more vast than ever. A faint voice at the back of his mind urged him forward, time ticking steadily towards decisions he hadn't yet made. The next step loomed before him, and uncertainty wrapped around him like a shroud. He reached for his phone with shaky hands, contemplating a text to Lisa. Yet, as he hesitated to press send, another thought came forth. Would her understanding and warmth still be there when the realities of his dual existence collided? He wrestled with the implications of that choice, the crossroads so agonizingly close. And lurking beneath it all was a single, persistent question: how would he truly define himself amid the chaos of ambition and expectation? The answer awaited him at the intersection of commitment and fear. Jack's heart quickened again, and he leaned back, eyes fixed on the cafe's stark walls. Would facing this answer lead to newfound liberation or plunge him deeper into disarray? Jack sat in silence, the clatter of coffee cups and the murmur of conversations faded into a distant hum. He felt like a spectator in his own life, watching the vibrant hues of his aspirations clash with the muted tones of his corporate existence. His fingers drummed nervously on the table while his mind raced through the contrasts he now faced, the soul-filling allure of his art against the dulling predictability of boardroom meetings. The internal conflict unfolded like a canvas, vibrant yet chaotic. What was he afraid of? Was it the fear of failure, the possibility that he might not measure up to the standards he had set, or was it the skepticism of a world that thrived on predictability and conformity? He had always believed that his value lay in his creativity, but now, as expectations loomed, the brush he craved felt heavy and unfamiliar in his hand. As his thoughts spiraled, the phone vibrated on the table, its screen lighting up with an incoming message. It was Lisa. He hesitated, his pulse quickening as he read her words, "Thinking of you. Let's catch up soon." The warmth of her message seeped into his anxiety, reminding him of a safe harbor from the tempest that raged inside. Yet, it also stirred a sense of urgency. If he didn't communicate soon, would that connection fray into a distant memory? He tapped out a response, striving for authenticity, hoping to bridge the emotional distance wrought by his indecision. Would love to. Mind if I share what's going on? A lot's changed. He pressed send, attempting to push back against the creeping doubt that slithered through him. Was he ready to reveal how deeply he felt torn, to expose the core of his struggle? Before waiting for her reply, Jack took a moment to gather himself. He pulled out his sketchbook and, on the opposite page, wrote a list. On one side, he penned corporate life, the structured, secure world he had known for years, complete with its benefits and predictable career trajectory. On the other side, he wrote art, chaotic, liberating, unpredictable but also terrifying in its potential for rejection. Tension danced on the cusp as he looked over the list. The dichotomy felt stark, almost insurmountable. Did success truly lie in numbers, revenue, and meetings? Or could fulfillment blossom in the mood of a palette, in the expansiveness of a canvas? The more he wrote, the clearer the disparities highlighted his peculiar predicament. He had always been a risk-taker, defiant in the face of uncertainty, yet here he was, straining against the foundational limits of those very traits. Drawn back to the corporate fold by Stephen's familiarity, he wondered if he had allowed himself to forget the very essence that fueled his creativity. As poems and sketches began to flow into his mind's eye, Jack felt a surge of resolve. He needed to reclaim his narrative, the one that he dictated, not society nor former colleagues. What if I could take control? The question bubbled up with a quiet ferocity. He pictured scenarios where he combined both worlds, refusing to let one subsume the other. With renewed energy, he set down the sketchbook and picked up his phone again, determined to reinforce his professional boundaries. As he typed out a message to Stephen, stating his conditions and desire to collaborate while emphasizing his commitment to art, a new sense of power coursed through him. For the first time, he felt his fate was within his grasp, waiting for him to seize it. But before he hit send, the cafe door swung open, and in walked a character vividly distinct, a familiar face from his past, someone who once ignited both ideas and doubts. Canvassed in business attire yet unmistakably an artist at heart, Sarah stood there, a living embodiment of what he once sought to leave behind and yet a possible bridge to his unresolved yearnings. Jack's breath caught briefly. The air shifted, recognition shimmered in her eyes, both welcoming and challenging. Here she was, the embodiment of his past choices, ready to confront him at the very nexus of his burgeoning aspirations. Facing her, Jack wondered if he could navigate yet another pivotal moment. Was this an unexpected reunion meant to anchor him back to old ways, or might it be the very spark needed to reawaken ambitions long stifled? As she approached, an undeniable truth whispered through Jack's mind: choices lay ahead, and each one could alter the course of his artistic awakening. In that instant, he understood the fine line he walked between his past and future. The door had swung open, but where would it lead him next? Jack's heart raced as Sarah drew closer, the complexities of their shared history swirling around him like an intricate tapestry. Memories flashed, a whirlwind of late nights filled with passion, brainstorming sessions bursting with creativity, and the gradual drift that had pulled them apart. Now, she stood there with a look that both invited dialogue and demanded confrontation. "Jack," she said, her voice steady yet warm, "I didn't expect to see you here. How have you been?" He swallowed hard, grappling with the sudden rush of emotions. "It's been a journey, honestly," he replied, his voice rough around the edges, betraying the tight knot in his stomach. "You know how it is, balancing all the expectations." "Do I?" Her eyebrows rose, a hint of challenge dancing in her gaze. "You were always the one with the wild ideas. It seems like you've traded them in for a corporate life." That statement cut deeper than he anticipated, nudging at the insecurities he had only recently begun to confront. "I've been trying to find a balance," he responded defensively, the words tumbling out. Was this the kind of conversation he welcomed, or was it a trap that led him back to his self-doubt? "And are you finding it?" she pressed, leaning slightly closer, as if coaxing a truth out of him. Jack took a breath, stabilizing his tumult. This was an opportunity, a chance to articulate his desires instead of allowing them to fester in silence. "I've been reevaluating what I want. I miss creating." The admission hung in the air, heavy and raw. A flicker of understanding passed across Sarah's face. "You're an artist, Jack. You know that. All the corporate perks in the world won't fill that void. What are you planning to do about it?" Her directness ignited something dormant within him. It was a question he had been grappling with but avoided admitting loudly. Speaking it out loud felt like taking a brush to a canvas for the first time in years. "I'm not sure yet, but I want to explore options, even if that means stepping outside the box." A spark of hope ignited in her eyes, urging him to continue as if she were feeding a flame. "What if you go a step further? You could blend both worlds. Your creativity could revolutionize your work, rather than diminish it." "I've thought about that," he admitted reluctantly, still wrestling with the realization that merging these identities could be revolutionary yet daunting. "Then why not start with your old projects? Revisit those ideas you shelved. You might find a way to reintegrate them into your work," she suggested, her enthusiasm gently prodding him into introspective territory. Every word felt like a game-changing brushstroke in Jack's mind. Delving back into his dormant passion could indeed rekindle parts of himself he thought lost. "It's easier said than done," he murmured, a mix of excitement and fear flooding his thoughts. "Then it's time to make it challenging." "That's where true growth happens," Sarah replied, her confidence urging him toward resolution. The conviction in her voice stirred Jack's resolve, spinning webs of possibility that dangled tantalizingly from the edge of his imagination. But as the conversation deepened, a subtle apprehension emerged within him. Was he prepared to transform these thoughts into actionable steps? The fear of anonymity beneath corporate rules was shadowed by the thrill of artistry taking shape. Jack realized he would have to overcome not just the external barriers but also those nagging internal hesitations that threatened to hold him back. Then, as if reading his thoughts, Sarah's expression changed. "You know, I'm hosting a small gathering of creatives this weekend. It would be great to have someone as dynamic as you there. It could be a fresh start for you, or at least a push." Jack's mind raced, weighing the implications. Here was a tangible opportunity to reclaim his artistic life, to step into a world that not only challenged him but also could lead to the revelation he craved. Yet, the voice of doubt echoed loudly, but what if I fail? What if the old insecurities surface again? Jack took a deep breath, realizing he was at an intersection. Can I let you know after I think it through? He asked, his voice steadier now, rejecting anxiety's grip. Of course, but don't take too long. Creativity waits for no one, Jack, she said, her voice playful, yet an undeniable seriousness behind it. As she turned to leave, Jack felt a jolt of renewed energy surge within him. This was the impetus he needed, a call to action echoing in the gaps of his uncertainty. Would he accept the invitation and step into a realm of risk and creativity, or would he retreat to the safety of the corporate shadows? The decision loomed like an unfinished canvas, waiting for him to make his mark, and the question lingered in the air: would he summon the courage to bridge the gap between his past and future? Jack paced the dimly lit hall of his apartment, the gravity of Sarah's invitation echoing in his mind like a rhythmic drumbeat. Every step he took felt like a counterpoint to the world he had built around himself, a world dictated by safety, expectations, and a fear of failure. He used to thrive in chaos, dancing between ideas and dreams, but now he felt anchored by limitations. What would it mean to attend a gathering? The thought both excited and terrified him. It was a leap into the unknown, a reawakening of the muted artist buried beneath the business facade. Yet the lingering question gnawed at him: could he really mesh his professional identity with his creative aspirations without plunging back into chaos? Standing by the window, he gazed at the city below, the lights twinkling like fleeting opportunities. He remembered every ambitious idea that had crossed his mind, like shooting stars, ideas that fizzled under the weight of practicality. But maybe blending the two worlds was the key to a richer, more fulfilling life. Could he infuse his corporate framework with passion and creativity? Jack leaned against the windowsill, allowing the cool glass to temper his growing anxiety. He reflected on the corporate meetings filled with numbers and strategy, moments when he de-silenced the creative voice within him. His heart began to race, not from fear but from a growing sense of urgency, the desire to reclaim his narrative, to redefine what success meant to him. As if summoned by his thoughts, a stack of old sketchbooks caught his eye on the nearby shelf. They sat there, forgotten relics of his former self. Slowly, he walked over and picked one up, dusting off the cover. Flipping through the pages, he encountered wild designs, color splashes, and unfiltered thoughts that once flowed freely from his mind. Each page was a portal back to moments when he dared to think differently, a stark contrast to the sterile presentations of his 9-to-5 life. His fingers traced the lines as memories flooded back. He had been fearless then, unafraid to challenge conventions. There was a distinct thrill in creation, a high that no corporate success could match. But had he lost that part of himself forever? Jack felt an unexpected anger at the constraints he had accepted. He was not just a cog in a machine, he was an artist, a creator. Could he step back into that realm without losing everything he had worked for? The internal battle ignited fire in his gut. An idea began to form, ethereal yet alluring. What if he approached his work as an artist? What if his corporate tasks became canvases for new ideas, strategies infused with creativity rather than just rigid protocols? His determination solidified. He would experiment, channeling the raw creativity from those dusty pages into his presentations. Turning back to the window, Jack took a deep breath, the air filling his lungs with inspiration. He knew this weekend was a test, not just of his willingness to step outside his comfort zone but of how deeply he could embrace his identity as a creator. Suddenly, his phone buzzed, jolting him from his thoughts. It was Sarah, a gentle reminder asking if he had decided about the gathering. He hesitated, his thumb hovering over the reply button. This was a chance to reconnect, to step back into the vibrant ecosystem of creativity she represented. Jack knew he couldn't linger in this moment of indecision any longer. He wanted to dive into this life-changing experience but feared the vulnerability it brought. Would he be able to communicate with these creatives, shedding the corporate armor he had worn for so long? With a shuddering breath, he typed, "I'll be there." As he hit send, he felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension wash over him. This decision marked the beginning of a journey, a dive into the chaotic waters of his identity. But the question remained, how would he navigate this new landscape filled with creative souls who thrived on uncertainty? The thrill of the unknown beckoned, and Jack stood at the precipice of something significant. Would he rise to the challenge, or would he find himself drowning in self-doubt once more? Jack arrived at the venue feeling like the last puzzle piece in a complex, vibrant mural. The laughter and chatter of the gathering washed over him as he stepped into the room, a chaotic blend of familiar creativity and unfamiliar faces. His heart raced. He was straddling two worlds, the corporate and the artistic, with no clear map of how to maneuver through either. At first, he lingered by the entrance, observing a circle of people animatedly discussing their art. Each vibrant personality sparked his own dormant creativity, but self-doubt wormed its way into his mind. What could he possibly contribute among these passionate souls? He took a deep breath, remembering the sketches in his sketchbook, remnants of a self that had once been unconstrained and thriving. With shaky resolve, he approached a smaller group clustered around a projector displaying a range of artwork. They were an eclectic mix of designers and illustrators, their energy infectious. As they exchanged ideas and debated techniques, Jack felt the bounds of his corporate persona fraying. There was no PowerPoint here, only stories and inspiration that flowed like a refreshing breeze. "Hey, do you have any work to share?" An eager voice broke through his reverie. A woman with colorful hair and a playful smile gestured to him, urging him to join. Jack hesitated, struggling with the fear of revealing his past as an artist, a fragment of his identity that felt so far removed from the polished executive persona cultivated over years. "Actually, I do. I used to sketch," he replied, surprised at his own words. His voice trembled slightly as he picked up the courage to wave his hand dismissively, acknowledging the ineffectual wall he had previously erected. "But I don't know if it's art." "Is never wrong," she countered, her assurance dissolving his reluctance. "It's all about expression." The weight of her words felt like a lifeline tossed into choppy waters. He considered the idea of expression, a term laden with the promise of authenticity. Could he allow himself to be seen as both the analyst and the artist? Over the next few hours, he engaged with others, sharing brief glimpses of his passion for design and technique. Though he still had the instinct to analyze every interaction, something shifted within him. The enthusiasm of those around him served as a potent antidote to his reservations. Sprinkles of laughter and sparks of creativity ignited a part of him that he thought had long been extinguished. In a quieter moment, he was drawn to a corner where a series of paintings hung, a stark contrast of vivid colors against the minimalistic space. One piece in particular caught his eye. It depicted a tangled mass of color, interwoven with gold threads representing what looked like paths in a labyrinth. "Beautiful, isn't it?" A voice interrupted his contemplation. It was the same woman from earlier. "Yeah, it feels like a struggle," he admitted, unsure why he was sharing his thoughts so freely. "That's it," she said, her eyes sparkling. "Every twist and turn is part of the journey. It's how we choose to navigate that makes it art." A startling clarity pierced his uncertainty. Jack realized he was facing the very journey she articulated, the intertwining of his corporate life with the creative identity he yearned to embrace. He didn't have to choose one over the other. Instead, he could weave them together to create a new narrative, one where both could coexist without fear. Feeling emboldened, he shared ideas, tips for infusing creativity into corporate frameworks. As he spoke, he watched his audience lean in, eager for the intersection of business acumen and artistic pursuits. Their excitement mirrored his own rising enthusiasm, allowing a vivid spark of innovation to flow between them, but among the encouraging feedback, a moment of truth loomed. Was this newfound confidence real, or merely a fleeting moment of bravery? A hidden fear still whispered in the back of his mind. Would he retreat into the safety of his professional identity, or could he truly embrace his creative side? As the gathering continued, Jack understood that this experience would shape him in ways he hadn't yet grasped. With new inspiration straining against the confines of his old self, he now faced a pivotal decision: to build upon this moment of courage or let fear pull him back into silence. The thrill of self-discovery was palpable, yet the reality remained: could he sustain this momentum back in the rigid confines of his corporate world? With a flicker of determination, he stepped toward the group once more, ready to speak and challenge both himself and those around him. However, just as he prepared to share another thought, he spotted someone at the edge of the room. A familiar face, a former colleague who had always dismissed his creative side and judged him by his role alone. What now? Would this be the moment his past tried to reclaim him? The air thickened with tension as Jack's gaze locked onto the familiar figure. Mark, a relentless competitor from his previous firm, had always epitomized the corporate cynic. The kind of person who dismissed creativity as a frivolous endeavor, equating success solely with numbers and targets. Jack's heart raced, his fresh burst of confidence wavering under the weight of past encounters. Why is he here? Jack thought, unease coiling in his stomach. Memories of Mark's condescending remarks flashed through his mind, those moments that had chipped away at his artistic aspirations. Jack's impulse was to retreat, to hide behind the polished guise of the corporate professional he had successfully portrayed for so long. Yet here, in this vibrant sanctuary of creativity, he felt something more profound stir within him, the desire to proclaim his truth. Mark caught his eye and, with a smirk that seemed to cut through the vibrant atmosphere, approached. Interesting gathering you've stumbled into, Jack. Didn't he expect to see you here, he said, feigning interest but dripping with condescension. The easy familiarity of their past interactions threatened to overshadow Jack's resolve. What would Mark think if he knew about the sketches? Would his old colleague laugh at the budding artist standing before him? Jack's hands trembled slightly as he grappled with the decision to defend his newfound identity or allow Mark's presence to subdue his spirit. What do you think about all this? Mark waved dismissively at the art. A distraction, right? You know, you can't seriously believe you can make a career out of expressing feelings. With a steadying breath, Jack felt a surge of defiance. Mark's words were a test, an opportunity to reaffirm his journey instead of retreating. Actually, I believe creativity has a place in business. Innovation stems from it, Jack replied, his voice firmer than he felt. It's not just about charts and data, sometimes the best ideas come from unexpected places. Mark's eyebrow arched in skepticism, a clear challenge in his gaze. And what makes you think you can find those ideas, eh? You've always been so by the book. Sudden clarity illuminated Jack's thoughts. This was a moment of choosing, an act of carving out his identity in the face of judgment. Mark's skepticism became a catalyst for his courage. Because I refuse to let the fear of perception dictate my potential. Art, much like business, is about understanding the people behind the numbers. The words hung in the air. The room dimmed slightly as the energy shifted, others were tuning in, curiosity piqued. For a brief moment, Jack felt a flicker of vulnerability and strength colliding within him. Perhaps he did not need Mark's approval, perhaps he was no longer that same anxious young man striving to conform to someone else's ideal. Mark stared at him, uncharacteristically silent, the wheels in his head visibly turning. Was he considering the weight of Jack's words or simply debating his next condescending comeback? For Jack's part, he felt liberated. A delicate strength swelled inside him as he expanded his conversation to include those around him. Ideas can emerge from the chaos of creativity as much as they can arise from meticulous analysis. He addressed the group, inviting others into the discussion. The warmth of laughter responded, weaving through the air. Jack had opened a vein of dialogue, blending the analytical with the imaginative. Slowly, he felt the boundaries around him dissolve, and his deepest anxieties receded, but just as the burgeoning possibility of acceptance began to take root, Mark broke his silence. All right, Jack. Let us see how far your artistry takes you, he retorted, eyes narrowing. What happens when it doesn't translate? When the idealistic meets reality? The question hung like a cloud of uncertainty, a sharp reminder that the corporate world Jack had navigated was mercilessly pragmatic. Doubt crept back, would he really be able to maintain this balance? What if the artistic side of him faltered under pressure, as Jack opened his mouth to respond? he felt the resonant support of the group beside him. The feedback had ignited a fire within him, one he was unwilling to extinguish. He had a choice to make, not just about defending his newfound identity but also about embracing the discomfort of uncertainty that accompanied it. With the eyes of both his past and future upon him, Jack stood poised between two worlds, ready to confront the skepticism that threatened to ensnare him. Would he retreat to safety or leap forward into the unpredictable embrace of creativity? Just as he took a breath to fortify his response, he felt a sudden surge of clarity. This moment could redefine him, not just as Jack, the former corporate cog, but as Jack, the artist embracing his duality. What he didn't know yet, however, was that this confrontation would ignite confrontations with Mark that would test the very essence of who he felt he could become. Jack stood at the precipice of transformation, anchored in the moment that would forever change the course of his life. Each heartbeat resonated with a pulse of newfound defiance as Mark's challenge echoed in his mind, stirring questions he once avoided confronting. Clutching the edges of his thoughts, he let the silence fill the space around him, turning the weight of expectation into a canvas awaiting color. I understand that the road is unpredictable, Mark, and yes, there are risks. But isn't that what life is? It's not just about the sameness you thrive in. What if the chaos is where we uncover true potential? Jack's voice held steady, challenged yet firm. The group around him began nodding, absorbing his words. Slowly, Jack felt assurance building within him, like colors blending together on a painter's palette. This was at the essential moment to articulate his vision, a vision that interwove creativity and analytical rigor. He bore witness to the flicker of understanding within the eyes of those present, their collective encouragement pushing him forward. Every stroke I paint holds a lesson, just as every decision we make in business teaches us. I want to learn from both and create something that transcends my past. His declaration silenced doubts and breathed life into ambition. As Mark opened his mouth to speak again, Jack decided this was not just a conversation of opinions, but a testament to his growth. Your perspective may have merit, but I refuse to let past limitations define what I can achieve. The world needs creativity, companies need it to innovate and grow. And I will find a way to marry these worlds. With that declaration, Jack felt an exhilarating rush of energy. He dared to step beyond the shrouds of corporate identity that had encased him for so long. This clarity marked a watershed moment for him. No longer was he the CEO fearing rejection, he was a creator, a visionary, balancing his dual existence. Jack looked around the room, finding Lisa's supportive gaze among the crowd. Her smile emboldened him. The rest of the evening flowed organically, sharing ideas that merged artistry with business strategy. Jack confidently navigated back and forth between the worlds he had feared reconciling. The laughter and inspiration that filled the space illuminated a path forward, one where he didn't need to choose between the safety of conformity and the thrill of creativity. As discussions evolved, Jack felt a warmth blossom within, one that only came from authentic connection and shared aspiration. Mark's critical edge dulled in light of the collective support, leaving Jack feeling not only valid but invigorated. By the night's end, a palpable shift in the atmosphere confirmed both growth and acceptance. On the ride home, he reflected on the transformation he had undergone throughout the evening. With each interaction, Jack articulated his thoughts with reassuring fluidity, embracing constructive criticism amidst a community of artistic souls. The weight of his past no longer bore down upon him. Instead, Jack had uncovered the tenacity buried deep inside, a deep-rooted confidence that it was no longer a question of whether he could freely traverse both worlds, it was a matter of how he would choose to blend them moving forward. In doing so, he unveiled a profound realization: creativity could fuel industry, and corporate insight could amplify artistic vision. A week later, Jack sat in front of a blank canvas in his studio, brushes perched at the ready. This was a new ritual born from commitment, a weekly investment in reclaiming the essence of who he was meant to be. Faced with the initial hesitation of starting anew, he inhaled deeply, pulling inspiration from the interactions he had just lived through. His fingerprints blended vibrant colors on the canvas, each stroke filled with rediscovered passion, hues bolder than ever. That day, he received an email from Stephen, requesting a meeting to discuss his input on a new branding campaign. With a smile, Jack recognized this was an opportunity to showcase how creativity could carve a new path for the team. He felt invigorated, not by the fear of judgment but by the idea of sharing his journey, merging art and business into a tangible strategy. As he wrote out his thoughts and ideas, Jack felt a surge of what genuine fulfillment meant. No longer shackled by fear or the need for validation, he demonstrated the strength of his dual identity: a successful businessman with vibrant artistic aspirations. In that moment, he achieved a profound milestone in his life, bridging the gap between rejection and acceptance, artistry and strategy. Jack was finally home in himself. Now it's your turn to embark on your own transformative journey. Don't just observe, be part of success stories that shape lives. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional tales. Leave a like now to help us feed the algorithm and spread the inspiration. Comment below your thoughts and theories about Jack's journey to reclaim his life. Share instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this incredible conclusion about overcoming challenges. Don't wait even one more second to make a difference in someone else's life.